ligeramente de una manera inferior a cómo se ha comportado el resto del mercado en los últimos meses y cómo se espera que se comporte en 2024. Esta ha sido su respuesta.
Thank you for having me today. It's always good to be here. So, yeah, the healthcare sector in 2023 was a bit challenged in relative terms. So the MSCI World Healthcare was up around 4%, with the broader market up closer to 20+%. And a lot of the performance that we saw last year was incredibly concentrated in a very small subset of names within the broader market, as we all know them, the Magnificent Seven. So I think as we came into the beginning of last year, there was still quite a bit of uncertainty, and investors generally gravitated towards the guaranteed growth stories, if you want to call it that. The idea is that there was really attractive longer-term secular growth in areas like AI and the AI beneficiaries. At the same time, that risk-on rotation that we experienced led some of the relative outperformers from 2022, when the market was more challenged, to underperform than in 2023. So that defensiveness, I think, was certainly one thing that left the sector behind in 2023. At the same time, there were some fundamental issues as well. Many companies were facing COVID normalization, so either overbuilt supply or declining demand for things like COVID tests and vaccines, for instance. You had inflationary pressures which were impacting certain consumer-facing parts of the market, the healthcare market. So there certainly was no shortage of issues, but I think there's this kind of stigma around the defensiveness of the sector as investors were shifting a bit more towards risk on, a bit more towards very exciting growth opportunities. Investors looked to take profits or reduce exposure to more defensive parts of the market and allocate that more towards tech and your kind of longer duration growth prospects. So for 2024, we still think that the sector offers very interesting longer-term investment opportunity. For us, healthcare is an interesting place because it's one of the places in the market that you can find both offensive or growth characteristics, as well as inelastic demand and defensive characteristics for more uncertain environments. So we think that there's a lot of opportunity to identify what are really good businesses within the healthcare space and to get some of those businesses at more attractive prices today.
También hemos hablado de la inteligencia artificial, que es una gran megatendencia que está cambiando industrias completas y está afectando también a nuestra vida y a nuestro trabajo en un día a día, bueno, en una base diaria, digamos. Le hemos preguntado también a Robert cómo la inteligencia artificial está haciendo que haya cambios dentro del sector de la salud.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the areas that we think is quite exciting for the healthcare space is AI, and we think that generally investors haven't appreciated as much the opportunity for AI longer term within the healthcare sector. We think about just how inefficient healthcare is from a data perspective. It does create a lot of opportunities for us to take that tremendous amount of information and use that to glean better insights to help improve health and improve outcomes for patients. So one area that has been in focus for many investors, I think, is the idea of AI for drug development, being able to have a pharmaceutical company leverage AI to identify the next great and successful drug and bring that to market very quickly. That's not one area that we're overly excited about, just because if every pharmaceutical company and biotech starts to leverage AI to deliver and bring to market new drugs, that's going to create more competition, and it's going to compete away profitability, and it's going to drive down returns for investors in terms of returns on assets and returns on invested capital. Where we think that there are greater opportunities on the AI side is in clinical trial management, for instance, so identifying the right pools of people as we think about bringing new drugs to market, making sure that those drugs are tested on diverse populations of people. If we think about things like robotic surgery, leveraging AI in robotic surgery applications to benchmark doctors to each other, to identify room for improvement and training, things like digitizing medical records for patients to make them more transferable, easily accessible. One big area is reducing medical misdiagnoses, which is a very big cost for the healthcare system globally. So instead of you going to the doctor, receiving the wrong diagnosis and receiving maybe not the correct treatment for your ailment, having almost a AI chatbot that the doctors can leverage to say, okay, if you have these symptoms, what's the probability that you have X, Y, or Z ailment? And if you have a greater probability of identifying that earlier, it can hopefully allow you to receive treatment earlier, help to reduce the possibility that you have adverse outcomes, and help to deliver a better experience for you as a patient while reducing cost for the healthcare system. So those are just a few of the ways that we think many companies will start to try and implement AI into their businesses. I think one thing on our side that we're focused on is we don't want to invest in a business solely because they have AI optionality, right? To try and figure out who the winner or loser in applying AI to the healthcare space is going to be, it's a very difficult proposition, similar to trying to identify who we think the next, who's going to develop the next successful drug or next successful vaccine, for instance. So what we want to do is we want to invest in businesses that are profitable today, where they have a number of interesting opportunities to grow, and AI is just one more of those opportunities.
Este año además es un año de elecciones y le hemos preguntado a Robert hasta qué punto los ciudadanos pueden sentirse, o los inversores mejor dicho, pueden sentirse preocupados por cuáles pueden ser los resultados de las elecciones. Le hemos preguntado también cuál puede ser el impacto de esas elecciones en el sector de la salud.
There's always going to be some degree of volatility in healthcare leading up to elections, just because you tend to have greater degrees of rhetoric around healthcare and some of the change. I mean, we did just see this recently with some changes on the Medicare Advantage side in the US, which has created some volatility as we approach the election. In our view, the likelihood of seeing disruptive legislative change in the US market is probably pretty low. We've had both candidates in office in the past. We have Biden today, we had Trump several years ago, and when we look at their kind of policies and their focus, Biden has not wanted to kind of reinvent the managed care business, for instance. So thinking about doing away with private health insurance in favor of a publicly funded option. So that's something that he's been pretty against, and the cost of doing that is a pretty massive cost. Plus, we had the Inflation Reduction Act, which was introduced almost 2 years ago, and that also had some drug pricing provisions in it. So we think that the likelihood, if Biden were to win, of disruptive change or any meaningful legislative change is pretty low. Plus, we also still have a bit of infighting within Congress as well, which makes it very difficult to get anything done. On the Republican side, they generally tend to be a bit more pro-business, so we don't expect there to be significant sweeping change to the healthcare side there either. So we're always looking at opportunities to kind of reposition the portfolio, buying into really good businesses where volatility creates better pricing opportunities, but we're not going to manage the portfolio around potential risks in the healthcare space. There just tends to be a lot of noise, and we think at the end of the day, for the sector, the likelihood of anything really meaningful happening is pretty slim.
Y ya metiéndonos de lleno en los fondos de AllianceBernstein,